the indigenous peoples of North America had many tales about life during those times, especially tales with respect to the great megafauna. And I've got a collection of those together that we'll address because they're pretty fascinating in their own right. Pawnee, there was a Pawnee hero stories and folk tales who talked about this. In the beginning, before making people, Tirawa, the creator, decided to create giant creatures to live in this world. Tirawa made them in many shapes, but in several ways they were all alike. They were very big and very strong. And lots of traditions have preserved memories of the great megafauna that went extinct at the end of the last ice age. And what's interesting about that is because within the context of all this new knowledge that's coming out, we have this boundary between the Ballingallorod and the Younger-Dryas, which is dated to just under 12,900 years. And below that boundary, we find megafaunal remains and not above. And below that boundary, we find the evidence of North American habitation on the part of the Clovis people, who then disappear right at that boundary. So in terms of the animal life, that's something I'd like to kind of dwell on a little bit because it's so fascinating and so interesting to to contemplate this bestiary, this ice age bestiary that occupied North America, because most people are not really aware or cognizant of how the extent of this population of great animals. So we'll get into that a little bit here. Is going back through, one of my early textbooks was The Earth Through Time by Harold L. Levin, geologist, which was from 1982. And he was referring to the Pleistocene and its occupants. And he said that the Pleistocene was a time of splendid diversity among mammals. The fauna was probably more varied and impressive than that of Africa a century ago. The Pleistocene was an age of giants in which colossal ground sloths, beavers over 2 meters tall, giant dire wolves, bison and tall rangy mammoths, and woolly rhinoceroses ranged far and wide across the continents. Earlier, way back in 1836, when Charles Darwin was exploring the American continent, this is what he said: "It is impossible to reflect on the state of the American continent without astonishment. Formerly, it must have swarmed with great monsters. Now we find mere pygmies compared with the antecedent allied races." And I think we'll do a few images here to help stimulate an appreciation of the nature of some of these beasts. We have a really interesting graphic. So on the left, we have a modern elephant jaw, and on the right, we have a mastodon jaw. So these mastodon remains were being found all over non-glaciated North America, particularly on the east side in the Mississippi Valley, and in the southeast, mastodons were quite prolific. Bradley and I visited the so-called Big Bone Lick on the border of Kentucky and Ohio, maybe a decade ago, 15 years ago?
Closer to 15 now, yeah, man.
Yeah, years go by so quick, I lose track. But this was a mastodon, a mass death site of mastodons. And it goes back in history because it was discovered by early explorers. And in fact, a number of the specimens that were found there along this swampy creek side were sent to Thomas Jefferson, who had a collection in one of the rooms in the White House of these great extinct animals. When they first found these bones, they didn't know what they were looking at. When they looked at this jaw, they found these teeth here. Now, mastodons are browsers, which means that they're eating tree branches. So they have really big, powerful jaws, and their molars are, as you see here. Well, when they found these jaws, of course, what they're thinking is that, my God, we found the jawbone of a monster. And it was assumed that it was probably a carnivorous beast. just because of the nature of the molars in there. But you can see it. Look, compare the molars of the mastodon over here to the molars of the modern elephant. And you can see how they might have been pretty nervous about.
Yeah, those are.
Is this the and see when Lewis and Clark went out on their expedition, Thomas Jefferson sent a secret message to Clark, I believe it was. I don't remember which one. Saying that if you encountered, and since they didn't know what it was, they called it the American Incognitum. If you find one living in the Western wilderness, try to capture it and bring it back.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think Jefferson was thinking it would be a nice addition to the grounds there at the White House to have a mastodon grazing. No, they literally didn't know if it was a carnivore or an herbivore. They didn't know. Of course, and it's an herbivore. It's like all proboscideans and elephants. It eats plant matter.
I was just going to say he had quite a fossil collection already, so he was definitely interested and knew about the stories of these great skeletons that have been found and the bone finds. So he's like, yeah, bring that back to me.
Yeah, and I wish that we had a president today that had a collection of extinct animal bones in the White House. And if I ever am elected president, I promise that I will dedicate one room of the White House to
Randall Carlson
to extinct megafaunal remains. Okay, so there we have the great American Incognitum, a mastodon skeleton unearthed by Charles Wilson Peale in 1801 in the Hudson Valley.
Still looks like a monster.
Yeah, now imagine that and look at the skull. See, when you find the skulls of these extinct proboscideans, this was one of the things that led to legends of Cyclops, that there was a single big eye right in the forehead. Sure. Now, can you imagine you're hiking merrily along, along the trail, and you're up in, so this is just going to be north of New York City. You're hiking along, and all of a sudden you come around the bend, and you come face to face with this guy.
Yeah.
Our ancestors did. That's the point. Our ancestors did.
Run away, run away.
How do you know that's not actually a Cyclops skull stuck on that elephant skeleton?
Well, I mean...
Somebody messed that up.
All right. And here's another one.
And so that was probably 14 feet high, 12, 14, does it say? Yeah.
The guy sweeping back there.
Yeah. Well,
crazy
mastodons are, well, never mind. So here's a skeleton, and just for the sake of scale, I put an old picture in there at the appropriate scale.
All right.
Circa 1998.
Yeah, that was about 1998. Okay.
Is that the same skeleton as the previous picture?
No, this is a different. This is the Warren mastodon. It was found. Where was he found? In Ohio, I think. And here's kind of a reconstruction of what one of them would have looked like. This is a mastodon found in New York State. Obviously, this, like I said, this is a reconstruction. But, actually, he looks a lot. All I'd have to do is add a couple of tusks to one of my dogs, and he'd look like that. But, yeah, there you go. So think about that. This guy was very prevalent in North America during the Ice Age. And here's another Mammoth americanum, the American mastodon, existed from about 5 million years before present to about 12,000. And the painting here, one of my favorite books, and I think it's still available. I'll pull it out here with Art Zdeněk Burian, who is one of my favorite artists of extinct animals. I'll show the book after a minute here when we stop the screen share. But we'll keep going. Let's see. I put a figure in here so you can kind of get a sense of the scale here.
Oh, yeah.
Lunch.
All right. Let's keep going here. Yes, Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, existed from approximately 2 million years before present. I'm putting down 12,000 years before present only because I made this probably 15 years ago. I put this together, or even longer than that. And so at that time, the onset of the Younger-Dryas had not been precisely dated to 12,000, slightly less than 12,900. But it's very possible that the extinction did come through several waves. But again, most of the evidence seems to suggest that Younger-Dryas boundary marks the cap where most of the megafaunal species that disappeared did so at that point. This is Charles R. Knight, who did paintings for the American Museum of Natural History, and he is one of the considered great artists of extinct animals, including dinosaurs. And he did several books. I had a book illustrated by him as a kid that really served to stimulate an interest in all of this kind of stuff. So yeah, Charles R. Knight. And I'm sure anybody, if you could look him up online, you'll find out a lot of information about him and hopefully some high-res reproductions of some of his paintings. So this was the Homotherium, which was a sort of a cheetah-like animal that went extinct. The Megaloceros, the giant Irish elk, and notice the dire wolves. So this guy here, let's see, I think I put Brad in there for scale. Yes.
Wow.
Ugh.
You can see how impressive that beast. And you can see from this, you probably would not want to have a pack of dire wolves on your tail.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's been a number of paleontologists that I've read, I can't think of off the top of my head who, because this was many years ago, were speculating that one reason, for example, that the American mountain lion is scared of dogs might be some kind of genetic memory of dire wolves. Yeah. Because even a little 40-pound mutt can tree a mountain lion. And you're going, wait a second, come on.
But if I would have gotten the video, it would have been worth it.
It would have been. It would have been.
I don't know. That would have been worth it.
For
I'm
posterity.
wondering if there's a connection between dire wolves and legends about dire wolves and werewolves. Lycanthropy.
Lycanthropy.
I don't know. I don't know that, but
There is, probably won't go into that. Interesting. What? There are just interesting wolf legends of not werewolves, but giant dark dogs as well. In Europe.
Yeah, devil dogs and things. Yeah.
Yes.
Look at these guys.
Right. That would be terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be terrifying to have what was the movie that came out with Liam Neeson here a year or two ago where they were crash?
The Gray.
The Gray, right. Anybody see that?
Yeah, that was a
tense
movie. Yeah. Yes, very tense movie. I mean, you wind up putting yourself in the shoes of these characters these guys who survive a plane wreck and then are chased across the frozen north by
Alaska. I think they're in Alaska, probably.
Yeah, they're chased across the tundra and then through the woods by a pack of wolves that are essentially hurting these guys, and they don't realize it. The wolves are hurting them.
Yep.
Okay.
Not cool.
This is Panthera atrox, the American Pleistocene lion, and you'll notice he's just killed a horse, and the lion is as big as the horse.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, let's see, who have I got here? Okay, so there's a human to scale.
Man. Yeah,
So you start to understand why an island out in the middle of the Atlantic would be a good place to set up your society.
There aren't horse-sized giant cats.
Yeah.
That would like to eat you for lunch.
That's right.
See, as we go through this, you begin to realize that, humans during the late Pleistocene, when they got up in the morning, their priorities were a lot different than many of us today, who's wake up in the morning and our most important goal for the day is to not be eaten.
Yeah.
That would be a whole different mindset. Mammuthus trogontherii. This was, I think this was the largest of the mammoths. Yeah, there we go. I put a little figure in here. You can see how big these guys were.
God.
They were huge. Up to 16 feet tall at the shoulder.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It is. And just some various art that I found. I don't know who painted this. Oh, yes. And then here, this was at Hot Springs, South Dakota. This was the Mammothus imperator, the imperial mammoth, which was another really big mammoth. And that's Graham Hancock there next to. So this was basically a life-size mock-up of Mammothus imperator. So we've seen 4 species, and then there's woolly mammoths. So you've got 4 different species of mammoths, or proboscideans. Proboscideans means the long proboscis, right? Four species of proboscideans in North America. How many have you got in Africa today? 1. How many have you got in India? 1. So you got two distinct species of proboscideans alive today. Yet there was 4 in North America during the Ice Age. Now here's
0 today.
Yeah, versus 0 today. So here's your diagram of a grizzly bear skull, and I can imagine you wouldn't want a mad grizzly bear after you.
Oh, so it's pretty big.
But the cave bear is this guy,
Oh man.
Ursus spalaeus, the giant cave bear. So you can see when Darwin is talking about North America swarming with these giant monsters, because I mean they're finding this stuff, you see, and they're going and they're attempting to understand this.
Short-faced cave bear, is that what that is?
No, that's Arctodus simus. This is Ursus spalaeus, which is the giant Ursus spalaeus, as in caves. Ursus bear, so it's the giant cave bear. And there's a way you can distinguish between Ursus spalaeus and Arctodus simus. I'll show you a slide in a minute, which is the easiest way to differentiate between the 2 different bear species. So here's the comparison of the modern grizzly skeleton with that of Ursus spalaeus, the giant cave bear. So so then here's Charles. Okay, so here's Ursus spalaeus, giant cave bear. Also became extinct, at that same Younger-Dryas boundary. And I'll put, there's Brad in there for scale. You got to hand it to Brad. That guy has a lot of nerve.
Yeah.
And so here's Charles R. Knight's version of the giant cave bear. I'll show you an image here of Arctodus simus, which is the giant short-faced bear, in a second. Generally, the way you can easily and quickly, even the layman can quickly distinguish between Ursus spalaeus and Arctodus simus is the cave bear usually is seen carrying a club. And that's usually the simplest way. And oftentimes the hat is a giveaway.
Rare bear.
Okay, so here's Mammoth primigenius, the woolly mammoth, sort of icon of the Ice Age, went extinct at the Pleistocene Holocene boundary. And again, this is Z and X artwork here. And again, Mammothus imperator. This was the really big one, 16 foot tall at the shoulder. And here's when we were up hiking one day, we came across this femur of a mammoth. What?
It was just standing there.
Sticking out of the ground like that.
Well, no, Brad had just set it up on end and had carefully balanced it just for the picture. Yeah. No, but this is actual to scale. So this is the thigh bone of a mammoth to scale.
Wow.
I better see. I'm not sure what's ahead of here. I better take a look. Okay, so. Okay. All right. Elasmotherium sibericum. This was the one of the giant woolly rhinos of Siberia. And let's see who put my brother Rowan in there for scale. Now that would be a pretty impressive beast, you got to admit. And then Coelodonta, the woolly rhinoceros. This was a North American animal. You found them quite prevalent up in non-glaciated Yukon and Alaska. I don't think they were found down in the southern part of the U.S. And Smilodon stalking a Shasta ground sloth. So that was one of the at least 4 species of ground sloth. the bison latifrons or the super bison and put a person in there for scale. Their horns could actually reach up to 10 or 12 feet for the really big ones for a span.
Man.
So this particular beast was like double the size or mass of the modern American bison. And I don't know how many of you have ever encountered close up modern American bison, but they're a pretty impressive animal.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a bunch of them around us. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about.
I'd like to make me a drinking horn out of one of those.
Hey, yeah. Well, listen, man, I want a helmet with bison latifrons.
Yeah.
Right.
A 10-foot. That's
Listen, if any
horn helmet.
yeah, if anybody out there listening has horns from a bison latifron, hey, it'd be really cool. I would wear it. I would get a helmet and I would wear it for the podcast.
I'm gonna have to get a bigger PO box.
Yeah. You're gonna need a bigger office.
Okay. And here's Castorides, the giant beaver. Was particularly prevalent in the southeast, but I think he was over there where you guys live too. So this was your 500-pound, 600-pound beaver.
Wow.
Don't even touch that.
Yeah.
Procoptodon, this was an Australian animal. The giant kangaroo.
What?
So, here we go. Let's not pass this up. Yeah. Arctodus simus, the giant short-faced bear. Now, you notice the long legs on this
Limbs.
brute.
Yeah.
The legs.
You would not
Speedy.
want this guy after you.
Uh-uh.
Your chances of survival would be pretty slim.
Right.
Yeah. So this was considered the apex predator of the
But
United
that guy
States.
can probably move pretty fast. I mean,
Yeah,
he looks like a dog.
He looks like part dog, part cat, part bear.
Yeah.
That's
I know.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this just gives you a sense of the incredible bestiary that this planet hosted up until 12 or 13,000 years ago, and that rapidly, in the geological eye blink, disappeared. But what has the dominant theory been up until recent years? Well, human overhunting.
Sure.
Brad had a spear and not a camera, and he took those guys out.
So, we're going to talk about that, but think about it. Okay, it's one thing to say they hunted the woolly mammoths to extinction, but wait a second. They hunted all 4 species of big old proboscideans to extinction, plus all these other animals that we were just seeing. How do you explain that?
Plus all the
Well-
horses. And, yeah.
Well, as I've pointed out, the flaw in that theory is, you've got roving bands of hunter-gatherers, 100 to 150 people in a band, maximum, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to, and how many bands are there? Where's the evidence for all these roving bands? Where's the evidence for the millions of people it would have taken to kill all these animals? There isn't any.
Right.
No,
We can't
no.
find any Clovis people.
Right. We can find artifacts, but no people.
Right.
Which brings us to another interesting
Anzac
subject
one.
that we have to come back to.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, too, do you think, were there large people? There were all these large animals. What was the flora like? Was it all large? Were the trees massive?
I don't know if the trees were, if the flora was necessarily. I haven't studied into that to the extent that I have the fauna.
Let's discuss that. For all these megafauna to exist, what was the environment like for them, and what was the competition for animals to get that large? It means they've got to have a successful diet,
Mm-hmm.
and that means lots of smaller game to feed on, which would have had to have been abundant for them to reach that size. It raises a host of other questions.
An enormous biomass to support that many gigantic herbivores.
Yes.
And yet we're in the midst of an ice age.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the other question I had. How come when you were showing those maps of the globe where all of this land was connecting into Asia and everything, why didn't they go over there? If people could come across that bridge, how come the animals didn't go across the bridge the other way, and why aren't they found all over there? Why are they just
Well,
here.
no, they are found over there. In fact, some of the densest remains of mammoths are found washing up on the shores of the Arctic Ocean by Siberia.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that.
I knew that about Siberia, but what about all these the megafauna? Were they also over there too?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for example, mammoths ranged from, unglaciated North America, both south of the ice sheet, and then up in the Yukon area and Alaska and the Bering Land Bridge, all the way across Europe and Asia, all the way across to the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, I mean, mammoth remains have been found in England.
Yeah, so this not only wiped them out, we always talk about it in terms of like, well, it wiped them out in North America, but it
Wiped out in Europe, all over the world. Yeah.
All over the world. Now, the question is, was it a simultaneous extinction all over the world? Maybe not. But the evidence that I've been looking at suggests that it probably was. And, we're looking at events here that once we get into exploring more specifically the nature of these events that occurred, it's likely that we're looking at a series of events. And within this series of events, there may have been a couple of spikes of enormous, extreme power, and then lesser of it. Just like if you have an earthquake, you may have precursor earthquakes leading up to the grand one. Just like when we look at major volcanic eruptions, like Mount St. Helens didn't just completely all of a sudden blow its stack. Krakatoa didn't just immediately all of a sudden. It pretty much gave months of forewarning. It started rumbling. It started degassing. It started becoming active prior to the major eruption. And then after the major eruption, you find a sort of a diminishing crescendo of aftershock type events, just like earthquakes will have aftershocks. And I think that's how we need to look at this. A lot of the critics are saying, well, we can look at the animal extinction and we see that it all didn't happen all at once, right? So therefore we can rule out impact type events. But I don't think that's really what the case here at all. I think that, yeah, we can certainly look at a protracted extinction event, maybe taking 1,000 years, without abandoning the idea of a global catastrophe or speculating as to what the trigger of that global catastrophe would have been.
Yeah, I mean, they don't think that that impact that happened killed all the the Jurassic period, or they don't think that the KT boundary happened in one night, right? That the impact did, but it took a long time.
It may have taken. Actually, though, in terms of the KT, it may have been really short.
Right, but still not that day, basically.
Not necessarily that day, but probably within a decade or less, because the consequences of that KT boundary were definitely global. And we're talking here about the 66 million year ago dinosaur extinction.
Right.
Which in a way has many interesting parallels with the Pleistocene Holocene extinction. And all of this is going to be the stuff that we explore as we begin to dissect these events and look at them under a much more detailed microscope.
So what are the hypotheses in the middle, or maybe that's what you're saying we're going to get to eventually? If you got a huge catastrophe that knocks them out suddenly from nature, and on the other end you got human hunters that wipe out millions and millions of these huge animals. What's in the middle? Some sort of disease,
Disease has been speculated.
There's just one or two other ideas out there, really.
Yeah, and pretty much. And as far as humans, what I would do is I would give to humans a role, but only in the latter phases. In other words, nature has wiped out the majority of these beasts, and there could be pockets of survivors that in that context could possibly be hunted to extinction.
Yeah.
And I think we should be open to that. I mean, that is a possibility. I don't completely rule out a human role in this. However, I think the human role has been vastly overstated.
Well,
go ahead, Mike.
Well, to digress again, but picking up on Snake Bro's comment, was it Kyle or was it Ross? Where are the remains of the Clovis people? We find remains of these areas. Yeah, where we find the remains of these megafauna, but where are the remains of these Clovis people?
That's a question I've been contemplating for years now.
There were probably a lot more megafauna than there were Clovis people, for one thing.
That certainly could be. And then, and if that's the case, then of course that completely mitigates against the humans.
Human.
You know, I've seen estimates now of the human population of 5 to 10 million during the late Ice Age.
And there were,
there was estimated. I've seen estimates 10 to 12 million proboscideans.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, how is it even possible? I mean, even if you had a 1-to-1 ratio, I mean, you're not going to be able to kill those beasts so fast that there's not going to be any, you know, you might have a small area where you could wipe out. Yeah. You take maybe 10 square miles, 100 square miles, and you just kill off every mammoth there. But
they certainly wouldn't be eating all the meat.
No.
Right.
So what would be their incentive to just kill them all? Just kill them all.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't make sense.
No.
Yeah, especially with the cats. I mean, they're hard to find.
Right.
They're really good at not being seen.
Yeah.
Sure.
The giant.
Yeah.
I don't know about these ones that are extinct. Obviously, we don't know anything about them. But we
Judging
have
on-
mountain. We have
Judging on the
mountain.
nature of cats. Sorry.
Yeah, we have mountain lions around here. Never see them.
Yeah.
Very, very rarely. And they make, you know, they have these rounds that are huge, miles and miles. They'll travel.
Yeah.
These circuits or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I mean, they can be hunted and trapped and stuff, but it's not
Right.
easy.
Right.
Well, that raises the question, you know, if the megafauna did vastly outnumber the humans, and I find the 5 to 10 million number just kind of specious. You know, it's, you know, where's the evidence for 5 to 10 million people? Just, it's.
Well, we can certainly come back to that because I've got some interesting papers that have been written estimates of.
Did the megafauna wind up eating all the Clovis people?
I don't think so, Mike.
Okay.
Somewhere off the continental shelf, there's a really big canoe with lots of remains.
Okay, Megatherium americanum is the giant ground sloth, and let's put Brad in here so you can get an idea how big this guy was.
Well, he liked his belly being scratched. I tell you
Yeah.
what, he liked that.
So these guys were basically the size of modern elephants. And just one more of the incredible megafauna. The glyptodonts, which were South American, giant armadillo-like creatures.
Wow.
So we haven't even hardly touched upon the South American megafauna, but they were as prolific as the North American, and they also went extinct.